What's going to happen is that you're going to put on lots of muscle mass. You might actually look even leaner, and that last layer of fat that you had is going to become completely negligible because your body composition will have improved so much. In this video, I'm going to teach you how to transform from skinny fat to lean, strong, and muscular. And my advice for the skinny fat person is much different from most people. And I was once skinny fat, and I took the wrong action steps to try and solve it. So hopefully this video will prevent you from making the same mistakes that I made. When you're skinny fat, you fall into a normal body weight range, and you actually look lean and fit with your clothes on, but when your shirt comes off, you appear soft and pudgy, usually with a layer of fat remaining around your chest and belly. People who are skinny fat don't eat so much to the point where they become fat and overweight, and they don't eat so little to the point where they become skinny and underweight, and they're usually quite sedentary, they don't lift weights, and they live an unhealthy lifestyle. If you don't know if you're skinny fat or not, the easiest way to tell is to take your height and weight and plug it into a BMI calculator, and it's gonna tell you what weight range you fall into. If you're overweight, then you're fat. If you're underweight, then you're skinny. And if you're skinny fat, then you'll fall into a normal weight range, but you'll appear fat with your shirt off. If you're skinny and underweight, then you need to do a proper bulk. If you're overweight and fat, then you need to cut. But if you're skinny fat, you need to take a slightly different path and only apply the advice I'm about to give if you are truly skinny fat. Because if you are fat or skinny and you apply this advice, you will screw up your results. Now here's where most skinny fat people fuck up, and I'll tell you a story in a minute about how I became skinny fat and the biggest mistake I made trying to solve it. Most people don't understand the actual problem they need to solve when they are skinny fat. And as I said, when you're skinny fat, you have a layer of fat around your tits and your stomach, and you might even have some love handles, which makes you believe that you're fat, but this isn't actually true. Let me explain. Now, back when I was getting into fitness, I started off as a little fat kid, and at this point, I really did not care about lifting weights and building muscle. I was teased throughout my entire childhood. I hated the way I looked, and I was tired of being fat, so I decided that I wanted to start a fat loss diet. Now, after unsuccessfully trying various diets, I learned that all fat loss came down to was putting yourself in a calorie deficit, so that's what I did. I lost a bunch of weight and got rid of all the excess fat that I had, but I didn't look any better than before. Initially, I did make the right decision by starting a fat loss diet, but I wasn't strength training, so when I finally lost all the excess fat I had, I was simply revealing the lack of muscle mass that I had underneath. And any muscle I did have to begin with was burned off with the fat because I put myself in way too big of a calorie deficit, and I wasn't strength training, which is what made me skinny fat. When I realized I had transitioned from being fat to skinny fat, I decided that the best thing to do would be to drop that last layer of fat that remained on my chest and my stomach because I wanted my abs to show. But this is where I went wrong, and this is where most skinny fat people go wrong as well. Why? Because excess fat is not the actual problem that is causing you to appear skinny fat. The real problem is that you don't have any muscle. So let's finish the story. At this point, I decided I would drop 5 more pounds and then begin a muscle building phase. But after I dropped the 5 pounds, I realized I didn't look any better than before. I then decided dropping another 5 pounds would do the trick. And this vicious cycle repeated itself until I dropped to an unhealthy body weight of 114 pounds and looked borderline anorexic and malnourished. You guys want to know what the funniest part was? I still had that tiny layer of fat because the problem wasn't that I had too much fat. The problem was that I was weak and didn't have an ounce of muscle mass. So I just kept cutting and cutting, convinced that I still had too much fat. But in reality, I had nothing to cut down to. And all you're doing when you're cutting as a skinny fat person is revealing the lack of muscle mass on your frame. So if I could go back in time and give some advice to skinny fat Rio, what I would tell him is that you need to stop cutting and focus on building muscle and bulking slowly, eating in a small calorie surplus every day of roughly 200 above maintenance, and put on 1 to 2 pounds per month. Your number one goal as a skinny fat person should be to gain strength across all of your lifts in the gym. The problem is not that last tiny layer of fat. The problem is that you have no muscle, and the more you cut as a skinny fat person, the more you are stripping off any tiny bit of muscle that you started with. Now here's the beautiful thing about being skinny fat. You're a beginner lifter, and how do I know this? Well, you wouldn't be skinny fat if you weren't a beginner lifter because you would have some strength and muscle mass. You can actually get away with eating in a very small calorie surplus and pack on lots of muscle without gaining much fat. There are very few scenarios when you're a natural lifter where you can make lean gains. For most people, it's borderline impossible or just painfully slow, but this is one of those scenarios where it is possible. You are in the perfect position to make lean gains because one, you're a beginner with no muscle mass who's primed to make fast gains, and two, you have a slightly higher body fat percentage, which means that you have a small energy reserve built up that you can use to pack on lots of muscle and strength. You have to capitalize on this opportunity, and to eat in a calorie deficit during your noob gain stage would be to completely waste your noob gains. If you focus on cutting during your noob gain stage as a skinny fat person, you can still put on some muscle, but you would be wasting a golden opportunity, and it might take you 2 to 3 times longer to put the same muscle mass on. If you are currently skinny fat and you're thinking that you want to cut that last layer of fat, what you need to understand is that you do not have much fat. It just looks excessive because you do not have any muscle mass underneath. What's going to happen is that you're going to tell yourself, okay, I'm going to drop 5 pounds and then I'm going to get on the bulk. I'm going to start focusing on building muscle. But what happens is you're going to fall into the vicious cycle of dropping weight until you actually reach an unhealthy body weight and you look sick and malnourished and borderline anorexic. It is inevitable because you will not look better by dropping more weight. The solution is to build more muscle. When you focus on bulking slowly, training properly, and gaining lots of strength across all of your lifts, what's going to happen is that you're going to put on lots of muscle mass. You might actually look even leaner, and that last layer of fat that you had is going to become completely negligible because your body composition will have improved so much. If you guys enjoyed this video, make sure to pick up my free 13-point drug-free muscle building checklist that will teach you the 13 fundamentals of drug-free physique building that you cannot build muscle without. And we'll talk soon. Peace.